Welcome back. The New York City Education Department is under fire for not doing enough to investigate whether ultra-Orthodox Jewish schools in the city are providing adequate secular education to their students. The New York Times reporting that a probe launched 3 years ago has made little progress. Only half of the 30 schools to be investigated by the Education Department have been visited by education officials who warned the schools of their attendance prior. The officials saying that the remaining 15 yeshivas did not allow them inside. The 2015 investigation has seen parents, students and former teachers at close to a dozen of these schools interviewed. Most of those interviewed saying the boys' schools taught math and English for up to 90 minutes a day until the boys turned 13. At this point, secular instruction stops. Others saying attendance in secular classes is voluntary. Now, Naftuli Moster is the founder of Young Advocates for Fair Education and a vocal critic of secular education at the yeshivas. He joins me now from New York. And Naftuli, great to have you with us. Now, the lack of a secular education in these religious schools, what kind of an impact does it have on the broader lives of these students once they graduate?
First of all, thank you for having me. The consequences of not having a proper secular education are pretty severe. What we found is that the poverty rates in ultra-Orthodox and specifically in Hasidic neighborhoods is skyrocketing. And we did an analysis of the poverty rate in Hasidic neighborhoods in Brooklyn compared to the rest of Brooklyn. And the poverty is so much higher. The dependence on government assistance is higher. Also, several Hasidic neighborhoods in upstate New York, such as New Square, which is in Rockland County, or Kiryas Joel, which is in Orange County, are ranked as the poorest villages in the entire New York State and even in the entire country. So that is just a very concrete result of this poor secular education. In addition to that, it's just that people come out of these yeshivas, they're barely able to communicate in the language of the land, which is, English, being able to understand each other, understand what is the history that doesn't just affect the Jewish people and the ultra-Orthodox people, but people more broadly. So it's about, the being able to earn a living, finding a job, supporting your family, as well as more broadly just being part of society and getting along with other communities and people.
Right, so what inspired you to take this on? Because I understand you went through one of these school systems. How has it impacted your life?
Well, that's correct. So I, myself, when I graduated yeshiva, I was interested in becoming a psychologist, or as you guys say, psycholog. And I walked into a Sorry, just a second. I walked into a local school, a local college, and I wanted to, pursue a degree, a bachelor's in psychology, and I had no idea what I was even asking for, what I was trying to express, what I want. So I just said, okay, I wanted to become a psychologist, and they asked me, do I have a high school diploma? And I didn't even know what that was, or that I ever even attended high school. So eventually they tried to push me through anyway, and they asked me to write an essay. And I didn't even know how to write an essay, what the word essay even meant, and so forth. So it took me a lot of remedial classes to kind of like come up to speed where I would be able to start college. And even after several years of being in college, I realized that I still have such tremendous gaps, not in college-level studies, because over there I was doing fine, because I invested a lot of extra time and effort, but I realized that my elementary, middle, and high school education was so severely lacking that I still had these major gaps compared to the rest of my classes and so forth. And of course, I couldn't obtain any decent job. I ended up working in a warehouse, schlepping boxes all day for more than 4 years.
Now, Mr. Moster, of course this investigation has been going for 3 years. You've said that you were disappointed about the fact that these officials attended the schools announced. Why is that?
Well, I've attended these yeshivas, and I know how these yeshivas operate when they're being told in advance that there's going to be an inspection. For instance, when we were children, I don't think anyone came to inspect the education portion of the day, just to see if the yeshiva is actually providing the lunches that they're getting funding for, right? So on days that the inspectors came and the yeshivas were given advance notice, the lunches looked entirely different than it did the day before, the day after. The kids were warned to behave, even to attend. And in fact, younger grades who normally wouldn't come in for breakfast came in probably to be counted as additional heads. I've learned from other yeshiva students that in their yeshivas, they would actually bus in kids from other yeshivas so that the inspectors count more heads over there. So we know what happens when you give yeshivas advance notice, so of course we wanted them to be unannounced. In fact, I've heard that in some instances where the city went to investigate these yeshivas now for the education portion, that the yeshivas added time to the secular studies. So for instance, if they normally began at 3:30 p.m., now they started at 3 or even earlier, that they put up signs on the walls that made it appear as if there's more of a vibrant secular education going on. They put out the few children that maybe speak a better English to be the ones, you know, speaking to the investigators. So this is the problem with having an announced inspection.
How can you be sure that this investigation will really bear fruits if that's what you say occurs when the doors are closed?
Well, it's true. Unfortunately, the way the investigation was being conducted wasn't going to be too effective, but I think the fact that the city is looking into it is definitely a good thing. Ideally, what we wanted is for the city to be more in communication with us, but instead, there's been very little communication and cooperation. So what we would have been able to offer is this inside access, kind of like behind the scenes, what is really happening. So, for instance, people often forward us documents that demonstrate a severe lack of education. Just recently, I got a hold of an ad in a daily newsletter or something that is looking that a yeshiva is looking for teachers to teach secular studies, and the ad in itself says you don't need to know anything. Stuff like that. So these are the kind of things that the city couldn't come up on their own. They need our help, and we were there offering and ready to be helpful, but it seems that the investigation was heavily influenced by the yeshiva leaders themselves, those that should be investigated, not the ones that should be leading the investigation.
Naftuli Moster, appreciate that insight from New York City there. Right, we're going out.